Hello again, art classes. It's Mr. K back here in the garage. Going to do another lesson with you today where we're going to create some artwork that looks like this, where you're going to create a cube using what we call cross-hatching. So our standard for the day is we're going to construct a representation of everyday life, and our objective is we're going to create a realistic representation of a cube using cross-hatched values. Let's get to it. So for our materials today, what we're going to need is a couple of pieces of paper. We're going to do one that's going to be a practice and one that's going to be our actual drawing. You're going to need either a pencil or a pen. You don't need both, but you could if you really wanted to. And you're going to potentially need a ruler. If you don't have a ruler, that's okay. If you have some lined paper, you can use that for your warm-up, and that'll work just fine. If you don't have a ruler, you can just try to make as straight a line as possible, and that's okay too. It doesn't have to be perfectly straight. So to create this drawing today, we're going to use a technique called cross-hatching, and I'll show you how to do that in a moment, but that cross-hatching is going to give us our values that you see in here. Now, what do we mean by value? Value in artwork is the amount of lightness or darkness that you see within the picture. So it goes from light to a little bit darker. If you notice here in this shadow, it goes from dark, it kind of fades into a lighter shadow over here, and that's what we're going to work with today. These lines cross-hatch each other. They cross over. The hatching means making a mark, a hatch mark, and so you can kind of see where those lines cross over each other. The more lines you have, the darker it is. The fewer lines you have, the lighter it looks. But before we can make our cube today, we're going to need to do a little practicing first and work on making a value scale. So if you take a ruler, now if you don't have a ruler, you can use lined paper, maybe make 2 lines worth of paper your area that you're working with. We don't need to make a huge area for this. 4 or 5 inches should be plenty. What I want you to do is put your ruler right down the middle of your paper. You can't see my whole paper. I have it zoomed way, way in so you can see the lines better. But I just have it right in the middle of a paper here. And we're gonna put a line, I'm gonna do about 5 inches there. Hold that ruler down and do about to the same spot there. If they aren't totally perfect, it's okay, don't worry about it. And I'm going to make some lines that stick up past the top of this. You'll see why in a second here. And I'm just going to take a guess here. That's about halfway, and about halfway in there, and about halfway in there. They don't have to be measured out perfectly. You can put the ruler away for now. You don't really need it. Now this is where we're going to put in some extra lines in here and do our cross-hatching. Now, I've talked about this in some other videos. Everybody's really used to holding way down here on your pen or your pencil and pushing really hard. Today, one of the things we're going to do, on this side is going to be our light side. We're going to call that 0. And way down here is going to be, we're going to call this 8. And 0 is plain white. And I'll put more lines in between these two so we can really make it precise. So for this to be just plain white, I'm done. I've already done it. But if I'm holding way back here and I want to do a little something in here, you can hardly see that. It's probably really hard to see on the video. I'm barely touching it. So I can just go all the way down. And if I go past my lines here, it's okay. I want to see, just do the first pass through, see how lightly you could just barely touch the paper. Hold way, we don't have to pinch the very, very end. Nobody draws this way, that's okay. We're gonna just hold down, same way you would hold it if you're writing a paper, except you're just gonna hold a little bit further down here, lighten up your grip, let your wrist kind of move a little bit, pull your fingers down, and just like that. We'll go through one time, the whole way through. Doesn't have to, I'm barely covering it. I'm done with this area. I don't want to have stripes though. I don't want to have a chunk that looks white, a little less white, where they're just big stripes. We want it to blend gradually. So I'm going to go just a little further down. I'm going to do that same thing again. I'm putting a few more lines in there. Doesn't have to go super slow. They don't have to be super precise. All the way down. Now I'm going to do the same thing here. I'm going to start a little further down. Maybe one right there too. Go all the way up to that line. Start right on that top line. Pull it all the way down. They can get a little harder and a little closer down here. Now I started about here. I'm going to start about right underneath of this. Same thing again. Now it's starting to overlap more. And notice that my lines are kind of, these lines are going straight down, and now these lines are going a little bit across. And I'll start a little further in. Maybe this time I'm going to go inside of that number 1 line. We go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and we already wrote 8. So I'm going to start a little bit inside of 1 and just kind of go straight down here at an angle. And go all the way across. So they're crossing over each other. And we just keep doing that. We maybe go this way now. I started kind of in the middle of 1. Now I'll start kind of over by 2. It's awkward trying to... Usually I would move the paper around, but I want to keep it so you guys can see it on the video. If it's too awkward to get the angle, keeping it straight up and down, you can move the paper. I can't because of the video, but you can move it. Now they're crossing over each other more. Like I said, if you cross over this line here, we don't care. This is just practice. Going from really super light to a little bit darker, to a little bit darker. Maybe you make some straight up and down, or straight across rather, instead of straight up and down. And we're just layering up these layers. We don't need to have it all be finished in one shot. So just keep throwing extra, a little bit more and a little bit more, and it gets a little darker and a little darker, all the way down. Just start in a different spot, a little bit further to the right. And the more times you do this, the darker it gets. So I think you're getting the idea. Now you just need to finish the whole rest of this. So now we've got our value scale, and we can use this scale when we're making our drawing of our cube. Now we can go back in. I see a few little spots here. And if you want to, you can kind of fix it up a little bit. Maybe these could be blended a little bit better. It's getting a little, it's not quite blending slowly enough. Do a little bit in here. Now I've got a little nicer fade from very, very light into very, very dark. And as we're going through this, we can have different chunks of our cube. We can look to this scale and say, oh yeah, I want this part to be a 2, or I need this part to be a 3 or a 7 as we go along. So now we'll go ahead and show you how to draw your cube. Okay, so let's go ahead and do some drawing here. Now, to make this cube, this is the one that I did earlier. I did this one with pencil. This one I'm going to do right now, I'm going to use a pen. It doesn't matter whichever one you want to use, that's totally fine. The thing that messes people up when we do this, notice the sides that are going up and down on this cube. They go straight up and down, just what we would call parallel rather, to the side of the paper. They go straight up and down. They don't curve outward. This line especially messes people up all the time. They think, no, it can't possibly go straight up and down. It has to go to this. It goes straight up and down. These ones here are going to go at an angle. This is going to go pretty much straight across. This is the only time. These three lines here and this line over here. Well, this line's going straight across too. These are the only three lines that are not going to be either straight across or up and down. So with that in mind, let's go ahead, see what we can do here. So we're going to try to do this same thing. Now notice my paper is what we call landscape. It is the wide way on the desk. That's going to work the best. And we want to make a nice, if you have a ruler, that's cool. If you don't, you can just do it freehand. Use something else like the edge of a book or something if you want to. It's up to you. We're going to make a square that's a little ways down from the top, maybe about 2 or so inches, kind of over to the left, because if you notice in this one, we need some space for our shadow to go off to the right. So it doesn't have to be really super close, but we want it a little close. This one doesn't have to be exact like the other one, about 4 inches, we'll call it, okay? Now I'm gonna make, and if it's not a perfect square, that's okay. We don't mind. As straight up and down as you can. And I'm just gonna connect these lines at the top and make one square. As I always say in these, I usually forget until we get quite a ways in. Feel free to stop anytime you wanna do some work. If you need to rewind a little bit and go back and see what you missed something, that's okay too. So now we have a square, and we're going to take that square and make some lines going off at an angle this way. Again, you don't have to use a ruler. If you want to, you can. Make them just go up a little ways. I'm going to make that same exact line. If this were a computer and I could select, copy, and paste right there, coming off of this corner, that's exactly what you want it to look like. We don't want to go straight. We don't want to go sideways. We want that same angle. See if you can just drag your ruler right straight over. That one's going up just like that. Tweaked it a little bit. And this one's going to go up just like that, the same length, so that we can draw a line straight across that top. Same thing down here on the bottom right. If we were making a glass cube, we would do down here, but we're not going to mess with that one. I'm just in the same angle. I don't want it to go straight out. I don't want it to go up. I don't want it to go over. I want this same angle. Just bring it right straight down, right off of there. Technically, if we were doing perspective, they're not really the same angle, but for what we're doing today, it's okay. Now, I'm going to connect the ends of these lines. I want it to be, see how that's straight up and down? I want these to be straight up and down too. And if you missed a little bit, that's okay. Don't worry about it. We're going to hide it with our cross-hatching. Oops. There. Close enough. I'm going to connect these guys. There we go. Now I have a cube, but we need to put this cube on a table and make it look like it's really setting on top of something. So what we're going to do is about halfway through this, I want it to be above this corner. If you have a ruler, you can put the bottom part of your ruler right on that corner, or a little bit above it, and then draw a line on the top. Now we're going to draw it from all the way at the edge, and I'm going to stop right at that line, do an excuse me, all the way over to this side. I don't want to draw it through this part. Don't want to draw it over the cube at all, behind the cube. This tricks your eye into thinking, hey, this cube, this box, is sitting on a tabletop and there's the table behind it. It tricks your eye into thinking that's all one line. It's two lines. There's a line here and a line here, but it tricks your eye into thinking that it goes all the way behind the box. So now, if we take a look at our old one, we've got very light tabletop. Our tabletop, that one's going to be more like a like a 1 or a 2. Maybe start with a 1 and fade it down to a 2 down here at the bottom. So just a few lines. Notice how light they are. I'm just going to bring this all the way down. I can get them a little darker at the bottom. I'm barely pressing on. It's better if they go straight across. If they go across like this line does, it gives that impression of a flat space going back. If you start making them up and down, then that kind of gets rid of that illusion of a table. So I'm just going to bring these across. I'll start it on this line and just barely touch. They don't have to be very close together at all. I'm going to go ahead and draw it next to it. I know I have a shadow that's going to go here. I'm going to put that on top of it later. I'm going to use these lines to add to that. Get a little closer together. Get a little something there. There we go. That's all we need for the tabletop. You can stop that now. So a lot of this, sometimes you just have to walk away, even though you might not feel like it's done. The top is going to be pretty much the same thing. We're looking at like a 1. And this doesn't have to go straight across like the other. We could just kind of there, that's it. That's all it takes. Be done. Now that front face, this one, the first box you made, you want that one to be like a 3. So if we take a look at our value scale, so right where that 3 is, that's a little bit more than this, a lot more than that, not a lot more. So we'll start there though. You can always add more. But if you go too dark, you're stuck with it. So, oops, come on pen, there we go. So I'll just go through one direction. I can go the other way. Put it right on that line. Notice how I'm just kind of putting it on the line and then dragging it gently across. That way I know I don't go too far. And I can go a little bit across my hatches here. And notice I'm still just barely touching the paper with this. I'm just doing more of it. So it's not a super fast way of drawing. I mean, you can do these kind of loosely. Loose is a art term for a little bit sloppy, and we like that. It's okay. Maybe I'll just do a few going across. I'll see how it looks. Maybe I darken it up later. I just need it to look a little different than the table. Maybe if I have some corners that need a little extra. There, that's good. I'm gonna stop there. That looks about right. I don't want it getting too dark. It's probably a little lighter than the 3 on my scale, but I can go back. These are just estimates. Now, this, we're going to have our light. The light is shining from over here. It's going to come over this way. And we're going to make a shadow going down here on the table. So I'm going to barely make a little line down here. I'm not going to put a top on it because I'm going to let the shadow fade. Shadows kind of, you know, as they get longer, they fade out a bit. So I'm going to go a whole lot darker on this side. This is going to be the part that's in the dark on the back end of my cube. So I'm going to go with like maybe a 5, 4 or a 5 even, maybe even 6. Let's go ahead. So these lines, I don't have to do them dark, but I need to do them a lot closer together. I'm going to start going this way. Put it right on that line and just drag it across. If you try to do it super slow and hard, it just looks kind of like you're making slow, hard lines, right? We want to just put it on that line and just drag it across gently, and we'll layer on a whole bunch more of them. Hey, I went over there. Is that okay? Yeah, not a problem. Makes it look better, actually. So So just kind of go down one side. Those lines a little closer together. If you realize, hey, I left a big gap in there, you can fill it in. So I'm not getting this side yet. I can go back and redo that. So I'll put it over here and go that way. You can do the same. You can also pause this and do your own work if you need to. If you feel confident, you can keep it going this direction and just stop on that line. Starting it on the line makes it so that it's harder to go over it. It's a little more precise. And then I can go across that lightly again. And for the video, I don't want to move the paper around, but you can twist the paper if you want to get a better angle. It's a little tricky for me going this way, but that's okay. The more they go across, the more times you do that and layer it on, the darker it's going to get. So that's about right. I could probably go darker in a little bit, but I don't want to spend all my time working on this right now. I can add some extra darkness. We'll beef up that value later on. I see a couple of spots along the edge that could use a little extra. Now, I'm going to do that same type of thing for my shadow. I'm going to get this. If this is a 5, I could go maybe even a 7 and fade it into 5 or 6 over into here. So I'm going to go a little darker. I don't necessarily have to go dark at the beginning. So I'm going to fade it out up to here. Keep that there. This kind of shows me where I'm going to stop it. I don't want to put a big dark line across here because I want it to fade out. Shadows don't have outlines usually. So I can go across this. I want this to be darker than the other. I missed a few spots in the bottom. So it's getting there. Especially if you're using pencil, one thing you want to watch out for is where your hand, this part of your hand goes. If you're drawing over here and you rest your hand and you rub it around, you're going to smear all that pencil. So try to be careful. Maybe even put another piece of paper down over the top of it, underneath of your hand, so that if I were, drawing right here, I could put that paper down that's nice and clean, and that's where my hand rests. I don't really want to have my hand anchored. That makes it hard to do the cross hatches, but your hand is going to be kind of on top of the paper, moving a little bit, and this way it keeps it from smearing. I don't have to worry about that with this ink, but if you're using pencil, watch out for the smearing. So I can go ahead and maybe make that a little darker in a little while. For the background, we want this background. You've got two options. You could be done right now and maybe just fix up some of the areas that you want to make a little bit darker. Like maybe this is getting a little bit of a stripe right here, so I want to blend that out. Maybe you want to go back and do that. Now, I was thinking that the background, I like for this to go like with a 7 or an 8 for the background. Just flat all the way across. Now, if you've ever done, what do you call this, the bubble wrap, you know that wrapping that comes around and you pop the little bubbles and it's kind of strangely satisfying to pop all the bubbles? That's what this is a little bit like. Once you can get into like just the pattern of going across like this, I'm going to do it nice and even for the whole thing, but I'll just do this one area and then nice and even over the whole thing, doing it this direction, and then maybe going the whole thing in this direction and just getting into that rhythm and that pattern. It's kind of relaxing and calming. And it's a nice, I don't know if you can hear the rain outside right now. It's a rainy day. It's a wonderful, like, sitting at home, rainy day kind of activity, just coloring in those lines. That'll do it for today's lesson. Hope you had a good time with your cross-hatching and using those values. Now that you've got a little bit of experience with this one, go ahead and see if you can put those into a different type of drawing. When you're drawing a person, when you're making the shadows, when you're drawing, maybe you could make a different shape. Maybe you could make a sphere or a ball or a cube or a triangle rather. Anything, you try it with those, experiment, play around, make little tiny drawings, and that way you don't have to feel like it's too scary and it's going to be a big problem if you mess up. So just play with it, make it your own, test out some different ways of doing it, and come up with your own method for doing some cross-hatching and making values. And until next time, have a good day. I'll see you later.